Hello, humans. Let's talk about origins. Some origins are lost to time, while others should just be forgotten in some cases altogether. Let's pay tribute and look at a children's rhyme from a different perspective. This is Stories from a Different Perspective by J.L. Sweeney as told by Argus Truin. I am Argus Truin. Story number 3, E.M.M.M. Eeine, Meenie, Miney, Mo. Catch a tiger by his toe. When he hollers, don't let go. Eeine, Meenie, Miney, Mo. Long, long ago, in one of the deepest, darkest jungles in Africa, lived the Eeine tribe. They had few enemies due to the courage and prowess of the 4 greatest warriors in their long history, Eeine, Meenie, Miney, and Mo. Eeine was the leader and the eldest. He was also the best tracker to ever live in the wild African continent. No man or creature could evade him once he was on their trail. He had once helped a neighboring village track a killer panther across monsoon-soaked plains. He was married and had 4 fine sons. They were his pride and joy, 4 boys to become men and follow in their father's footsteps. Meenie was second and was the ladies' man of the group. He was single, and all of the young village girls would always crowd around him listening to his stories of battles and the hunt. He was not modest and took great pleasure in amazing the girls with his tales of strength and bravery. He was the biggest and strongest of the quartet, standing at 6 feet 8 inches tall and weighing in at 245 pounds. He was a finely chiseled specimen of manhood. His physique and charm would win him the daughter of the chief if he played his cards right. Miney was the shy, quiet type. He was far more intelligent than the other 3, but his quiet nature often left him in the shadows of Eeine's leadership skills and Meenie's good looks and strength. He even felt inferior to Mo at times. Everyone in the tribe knew that Miney was the smartest, but leadership of the great warriors had been given to Eeine because of his experience. Miney resented this only a little, feeling that petty jealousy was far below the level of his intellect. Though he was a very good warrior, his talents were better suited toward politics. Miney had once averted what could have become a long war with the Baglahara, but by using his excellent mediation skills. That fool Eeine had been ready to fight, but Miney had prevented a disaster that would have cost many Eeine lives. Mo was just Mo. He was not the smartest or the strongest warrior, but clung to a strive every day to become better work ethic that had earned him the 4th position in the great warrior status. He was born of a lower social class and unknowingly held a token position. Everyone in the tribe knew that he was only there to make it look as if the chief was satisfying all of his people. Mo believed that he had earned the spot and refused to believe the rumors he heard. He was a kind soul and never hurt anyone or anything except in the defense of his tribe. Life had gone on far too quietly for far too long, as life sometimes can, since the last disaster had struck the tribe. Last time it had been a very heavy rainy season that had caused major flooding across tribal lands. Many crops were lost, and the great warriors had been sent far and wide to hunt for food. As usual, Mo came home with the least amount of game. Eeine and Miney were tied, and without fail, Meenie brought home the most and largest of the kills to feed the village. That was 11 seasons ago. Now there was a strange feeling in the air, and the great warriors knew that the peaceful quiet would soon be shattered and that some new situation would arise for them to overcome. Though sensing the impending doom, they could do little to prepare, not knowing what was going to happen. A season later, the most devastating and terrible event ever to occur would happen, and the lives of the Eeine would forever be changed. Eeine was celebrating her 9th birthday when she heard Mother Nature's call. As she made her way through the jungle towards privacy, she noticed that it was very quiet and still today. She completed her business and headed back toward the village. Suddenly she froze, feeling hate-filled eyes caress her body and gaze into her soul. She turned slowly and looked into the face of her killer. Her small scream was barely heard by the villagers who came running as fast as they could. Horror crossed the faces of those who arrived at the scene. Only bloody shreds of her dress and one small hand with twitching fingers remained. Cries of alarm went up, and the great warriors were summoned. "I've never seen anything like this," commented Eeine. "It's absolutely awful," whispered Meenie. "It was an animal, not a man," said Miney, who was rubbing some of the bloody dirt between his fingers and sniffing the scent. "Never seen an animal do something like this," said Mo. The others nodded their agreement. "It will take all of our combined strength to defeat this beast," Eeine said. "We must stick together at all times if we wish to overcome this obstacle. Everyone must be warned to stay within the boundaries of the village until this is over," Miney observed. Together they headed quickly back to the village. Noticing the forest go silent, the men stopped and immediately went still. Seconds seemed to turn into hours, and sweat began to trickle down their faces. They could feel the silence pressing against their bodies and the evil feeding off of their fear, trying to find a weakness to exploit. Moving almost imperceptibly, they began to reach for daggers and bring spears to bear. A bone-chilling roar shredded the night directly behind them, and the right side of Eeine's face disappeared in a blur of motion. Miney would spend every night for the rest of his life screaming at the nightmares of claws moving in a tracer-like slow motion, tearing Eeine's head in two. A gurgling sound bubbled forth, along with foamy blood from the half-mouth that Eeine had left, and he fell half-faced forward into the dirt. The others had scattered into the night and were silently watching the trail for signs of movement. A few animal calls later, Meenie, Miney, and Mo were reunited 30 yards down the trail. Creating a triangle defense, they made their way back to the village as quickly as possible. After sounding the alarm, they called for a tribal council to be held immediately. When everyone had gathered in the meeting hall and guards had been posted at the door, Meenie called for silence and told the story of how Eeine had been killed. He left out his usual heroics, which greatly disappointed the daughter of the chief. The chief sat very still, listening with tear-filled eyes. Eeine had been like a son to the old man, who had only had daughters. It was a crushing blow to him and nearly led him to a breakdown. "Meenie, I would like you to be the leader of the great warriors now. With your strength and expertise, you are clearly the wisest choice," the old chief choked. Many people saw Miney's eyes narrow slightly at this announcement. Applause and cheering had broken out and drowned out the screams of the two men guarding the door. A headless corpse was thrown across the room, and the form of a large tiger came into view. Stopping near the doorway, the beast stared evilly around the room. A child began sobbing. An old man began to pray. A wicked grin split the jaws of the beast, slowly transforming into a hideous smile that revealed bits of flesh clinging to its teeth. Mutterings passed around the room like a Super Bowl wave. A scream began low and quickly rose in pitch and intensity as a woman broke from the crowd and bolted for the open door. As she ran past the beast, it casually leaned toward her and slapped off her right leg at mid-thigh with one quick flick of a massive claw. End over end, the lower limb tumbled, landing only a few feet below the throne. The beast turned its gaze back to the chief as the woman cartwheeled into the crowd, spraying blood from her torn stump and screaming horribly. The old chief stared deeply into the eyes of the beast and saw death beckoning him. He grunted, grabbed his chest, and slumped forward. Chaos broke out, and people began screaming and running in all directions, many just knocking each other down over and over again in their attempt to flee. The beast sat back and swept his claws to and fro through the crowd of people, swatting one here and raking one there as if playing with toys. Meenie caught the chief as he fell and sat him back into the throne as the crowd began to move. He grabbed the chief's war spear and aimed at the beast, which had begun to pad toward the throne. Meenie drew back and threw the spear as hard as he could. The spear crossed the distance quickly and gracefully. Meenie's aim was perfect as usual. The spear struck the beast in the side, and the hut vibrated with the deafening roar of pain that the monster unleashed. It turned and ran through the doorway in the direction of the jungle. Meenie jumped from the throne and snatched up an axe and another spear and ran after the beast. Miney and Mo were being trampled as the crowd of people strove to get out of the hut. Mo had fallen and was in danger of being crushed, but Miney was there to save him. Miney never got any praise for saving Mo. In fact, no one ever mentioned it. After saving Mo, Miney finally made it to the door of the hut. Meenie and the beast were nowhere in sight. Miney sighed and grinned slightly to himself. If Meenie gets killed by the beast, and I can figure out how to kill it, I will be chief, he thought. Perhaps in the end, good things really do come to those who are patient and deserving. Meenie arrived at the sacred wedding circle and looked around. Standing on the far side of the clearing stood the beast, waiting for him. He decided that it must be an evil spirit because any normal tiger would have run off or been killed by his spear. He felt a stab of fear and took a deep breath, feeling confident in his ability to defeat the supernatural being. The tiger started toward him, and a green glow began to fill its eyes. Green glow. Meenie took a step back and cleared his mind, focusing on the battle to come. With a determined look on his face, he began to circle with the tiger. Making false thrusting motions at the tiger to test its defenses, he noticed that it never flinched once. It kept circling, a low growling coming from its throat. Suddenly, without telegraphing the attack, the tiger lunged at Meenie. Meenie thrust his spear forward, jabbing it deep into the left eye of the beast. Rearing back on its hind legs, the tiger shook the circle of trees with its bellowing roars. The movement was so quick that the spear was torn out of Meenie's hands. Meenie pulled the axe from his belt and watched as the tiger clawed the spear from its ruptured eye. With one eye leaking blood and fluid, and the other eye glowing brighter than before, the tiger attacked again, leaping into the air, up and over Meenie, landing behind the man and raking his legs with its hind claws. Meenie knew that he was duped as soon as the tiger sailed overhead. Before he could turn, he felt the tiger's sharp claws rip into the flesh of his thighs and calves. Stumbling forward, he tried to fight off the pain and refocus on the tiger. It ran at him at full speed, and the injuries to his legs prevented him from diving out of the way this time. The tiger hit him hard, and they tumbled over backward. Meenie shook his head and found the tiger perched on his stomach with a vicious, gloating grin on its face. He swung his axe, hitting the tiger in the side as its jaws closed on his throat. The tiger bit hard, and Meenie's head flew off as his second feeble swing bounced off the tiger's head. The tiger roared in triumph. Miney and 8 of the minor warriors ran down the path towards the wedding circle, toward the sound of combat. Entering the circle, they were greeted by a sickening sight. The entire area was covered with splashes of blood and shreds of torn flesh. Frightened to the brink of insanity, the men began a cautious search of the circle. Meenie's axe and spear lay drenched in blood near the center. Blinta, a minor warrior, fainted as he neared the weapons. Part of Meenie's scalp was draped across the axe handle. "Don't touch any of this," Miney commanded. "It has the smell of evil." Miney's mind was going 1,000 miles a second. With the chief, Eeine, and Meenie out of the way, the chief's job was just waiting for him to step right in and take over. He felt an excited chill run up and down his spine. He smiled dreamily. He would also have the chief's daughter. "All I have to do," he sighed softly, "is get rid of the beast, and I can finally live the life I deserve." Some of the men glanced at him but said nothing. They knew he was right, and that there was nothing they could do about it. Miney's brain was working at desperation speeds. The beast was evil and powerful, and Miney knew that he had to outwit it to kill it. Chuckling to himself as they headed back toward the village, Miney knew how he would defeat the tiger. He could possibly even get rid of some of the minor warriors who hated him. As acting leader of the great warriors, he could give assignments to whomever he pleased. There had been no attack for 6 sleepless, tension-filled days and nights, and everyone was on edge. Miney's preparations had been completed, and the entire village could feel the overwhelming waves of evil that kept washing over them. Miney knew that the time to spring his trap was near. Mo had not been included in Miney's plan, and had spent his time sobbing, praying, and moping near the chief's throne. He mourned the deaths of his 3 mentors. Each had tried to guide him along the right path, and though he was the token, he had screwed up many times, they had not given up on him. He prayed that someday he would be able to make them proud of him. Mo would never know that to the chief, Eeine, and Meenie, he was not a token. He was a son, a comrade, a friend, a brother. Mo had often wondered what it would feel like to sit on the throne of the chief. He climbed up the steps and noticed that the small section of the inside of the chair had fallen into the seat, revealing a small slot. Peering into the hole, he saw a flash of light. He reached in and touched a cold, hard object. Grabbing it and pulling it out, he found that he held a well-crafted, solid silver dagger. It was beautiful, and almost seemed to glow in the torchlight. Screams from outside caught his attention, and it felt as if the dagger heated up until it was almost burning his hand. Barnoir had been selected as the fastest minor warrior, and as and unfortunately for him, the bait. He had to follow orders, but he knew that Miney had chosen him because there was a good chance that he would get killed. He had never liked Miney, believing that he was a cowardly weasel, lucky enough to be born into his position. Barnoir looked around. He was so frightened that the sound of his heartbeat thumping in his chest almost concealed the approach of the tiger. It emerged from the jungle on the far side of the wedding circle and headed directly for him. Barnoir screamed and sprinted wildly down the trail, careful to avoid the booby traps that Miney had constructed. The beast gave chase and just narrowly avoided a pit trap on its first massive leap. Barnoir ran like a gazelle, and nearing the edge of the village could see the men waiting to attack the beast if it made it past the traps. Tragically, his happiness to see his people was his death. Forgetting about the tripvine at the end of the trail, he tore through it with his right foot. Knowing he was about to die, he screamed as loud as he could one last time as the spiked matting swung toward him. Its many sharpened bamboo poles passed easily through his flesh, pinning his body to the mat and carrying his lifeless corpse along with it, finishing the forward swing, then dropping him off as it swept back the other way. As Barnoir was being carried away by the spiked mat, the tiger fell into a pit trap where the floor had been covered with punji stakes. 13 stakes pierced the beast, and it jumped out of the pit, roaring so loudly that leaves shook loose from nearby trees. It charged into the open, and Miney shouted for the first wave of 10 warriors to attack. He told them that whoever brought him the tiger's head would be promoted to great warrior. The men charged forward, and Miney followed at what he thought was a safe distance. The tiger mowed through the men and came directly toward Miney. Miney threw a spear, but the beast dodged, and the spear only tore off a small patch of skin on its side. The beast opened its jaws far wider than it should have been able to and bit down on Miney. The tiger's mouth gobbled him all the way to his shins, where the teeth snapped tightly shut, lopping his legs off at mid-shin. Blood squirted from the stumps, and the warriors could hear muffled screams of pain from inside the mouth of the tiger. It lifted its head, and the men could see the shape of Miney squirming and caught in its throat. The tiger made a gagging sound, convulsed, then swallowed, and the Miney shape disappeared into its body. Mo arrived just in time to see Miney swallowed. He did not know of the contempt Miney had for him and was blinded by anger when he saw the tiger eat his last partner. He charged and threw a spear. The beast sidestepped, and Mo's spear hit Jamra, a minor warrior, in the stomach. Jamra had a sad look on his face as he sagged to the ground, his life draining away. Mo's sorrow only lasted a second as the tiger leapt toward him. Instinctively, his hand reached for the dagger he had taken from the chief's throne. The years of combat training he had received from Eeine, Meenie, and Miney were about to pay off. He thrust the dagger deep into the heart of the tiger as it slashed his chest. The beast made a wailing sound and turned to leap away, but Mo grabbed for it and caught hold of one of its massive toes. It lurched and jumped to get away from Mo, but he held on tight. Feeling the approach of death, the tiger spun around and tried to get its massive jaws locked on Mo. As it plowed into him, the impact forced the dagger deeper into the tiger's chest. Mo felt the tiger stiffen and then go limp as it fell on him, driving him to the ground. With the beast no longer moving, the minor warriors became brave and attacked. After spearing the tiger's body to a bloody pulp, they dragged it off of Mo. He sat up, and they stared at him silently. His chest was slashed to the bone in a crisscross pattern, but he was alive. He looked at the tiger, then back at the men. He got up and stood proudly, shoulders back, head held high as if he were already chief. He tried to walk, but staggered, and they caught him before he could fall. He smiled and nodded, and the minor warriors began shouting and cheering. Villagers began to come out of hiding and soon joined. Mo was crowned chief and married the chief's daughter. He had 6 fine sons and 3 beautiful daughters himself during his reign as chief. He promoted Hindor, Zenza, Lom, and Pone to great warrior status and trained them himself. The tribe was safe again, and would be for a long, long time. Over time, like the expanding circular waves from a pebble dropped into a pond, the tale of Eeine, Meenie, Miney, and Mo was told and passed along to other villages, cities, countries, and finally even to other cultures. As with all legends, the story is often lost and modified in the interpretation of he who hears it. Today, this tale has evolved into a method that children around the world use to choose one thing over another. Now you know the origin of the child's rhyme that even you probably used at one time or another during your life. To this day, you can identify a member of the Meenie tribe by the tiger slash ritual scarring each wears proudly as a symbol of their lineage to the great Mo. And that is a different perspective on an origin. Stay safe, humans. Don't be assholes. Later.